Human memory is not a camera. We have said this on this channel before. We will say it again because the justice system has not yet fully absorbed what it means, and until it does, stories like the one I am about to tell will keep happening. Memory is a reconstruction. Every time you remember an event, your brain rebuilds it from fragments, and in that rebuilding, under the influence of stress and time and suggestion and the particular urgency of a courtroom, things change. Faces change. Clothing changes. The sequence of events changes. The certainty with which you hold a memory has almost no relationship to its accuracy. Robert Kessler was 34 years old in August 2004. He was a warehouse supervisor in Portland, Oregon, driving home from a late shift when he witnessed what he believed was an assault in progress, a man attacking another man in a car park off the main road. He stopped his car. He watched for approximately 45 seconds. Then he drove to a petrol station and called the police. The victim, a 41-year-old man named Philip Graves, was found unconscious with serious head injuries. He survived, but he had no memory of the attack or of the hours before it. Robert Kessler was the only witness. His description of the attacker led, within 10 days, to the arrest of a 30-year-old builder named David Okafor. David Okafor spent 16 years in an Oregon state prison before 3 separate pieces of evidence confirmed, in the clearest possible terms, that Robert Kessler had been wrong about everything that mattered. Not lying. Wrong. Completely, catastrophically, documentably wrong. And certain of every incorrect detail the entire time. David Okafor had come to Oregon from Nigeria with his family at the age of 12. He had grown up in Portland, attended local schools, and built a career as a builder and general contractor, the kind of work that requires skill, physical stamina, and the ability to manage multiple projects simultaneously, which David did well. He was known by his clients as reliable and honest. He was known by his colleagues as hardworking and fair. He had a small crew of 3 men who had worked with him for several years, and they spoke of him in the way that people speak of someone they genuinely respect. He had a girlfriend, Patricia, whom he had been with for 4 years and had been planning to propose to. He had an apartment in North Portland, a truck he had paid off the previous year, and the particular modest confidence of a man who has built something from nothing and knows what it cost. He had never been arrested. He had 1 speeding ticket from 2001. His criminal record was, in the most literal sense of the phrase, entirely clean. On the night of August 19th, 2004, David Okafor was at home. He had finished work at 6. He had cooked dinner. He had called his mother in Nigeria at 8:30. The call lasted 22 minutes and was logged on his phone records. He had gone to bed before 11. The attack on Philip Graves occurred at approximately 10:15. The car park where it happened was 4 miles from David's apartment. David had never been in that car park. He did not know Philip Graves. He had no motive that anyone could establish. He had a phone record placing him at home at 8:30 and a girlfriend who said he had been home all evening. None of this, ultimately, outweighed a man who said, "I saw him. I am certain that is the man." To understand why Robert Kessler's testimony was so persuasive, you need to understand what he was like as a witness. He was not confused. He was not vague. He was not the kind of witness who hedges and qualifies and says he thinks he saw something. Robert Kessler was specific. He was detailed. He was calm and composed and utterly certain. He had the bearing of a man who knows what he saw and will not be moved from it. He described the attacker as a black male, approximately 30 years old, between 5 feet 10 and 6 feet tall, wearing a dark jacket and light-colored trousers. He said the man had a shaved head. He said the man had run toward the north end of the car park after the attack. David Okafor was 30 years old. He was 5 feet 11. He had a shaved head. He owned a dark jacket. The description matched David Okafor. The description also matched, with varying degrees of accuracy, tens of thousands of men in the Portland metropolitan area. But Robert Kessler was shown a photograph lineup 12 days after the attack, and he pointed to David Okafor's photograph with the same specific certainty he brought to everything. He said, "That's him. I have no doubt." What Robert Kessler did not know What he could not have known, because memory does not tell you when it has changed, was that his account had shifted significantly between his first description to the police on the night of the attack and the account he gave at the lineup and later at trial. On the night of the attack, Robert had described the attacker as wearing a red top under a dark jacket. At trial, the red top had disappeared from his account. On the night of the attack, he had said the man was medium build. By trial, the build had become athletic. On the night of the attack, he had described running toward the south end of the car park. By trial, it was the north end. None of these inconsistencies were flagged clearly to the jury. The defense noted some of them, but Robert was so certain, so composed, so specific in his trial testimony that the inconsistencies appeared to the jury as minor discrepancies rather than evidence of a reconstructed memory. This is the specific danger of a confident wrong witness. Confidence reads as credibility, and credibility in a courtroom is almost everything. The trial of David Okafor opened in Portland in March 2005. It lasted 8 days. The prosecution's case was, by design and by necessity, built almost entirely on Robert Kessler. There was no physical evidence at the scene connecting David to the attack. No DNA. No fingerprints. No weapon recovered. Philip Graves had no memory of the event. The prosecution's case was Robert Kessler's testimony, David's matching of the description, and the absence of a verified alibi. The phone call home at 8:30 was real, but calling from home at 8:30 did not prove he was there at 10:15. The defense made every argument available to them. They presented the inconsistencies between the night of statement and the trial testimony. They brought in an expert on eyewitness memory who testified about the science of reconstructive memory, about the effect of time and suggestion on witness accounts, about the documented unreliability of cross-racial identification under stress. Robert Kessler, on cross-examination, was unshakable. He acknowledged the minor inconsistencies. He said that memory was imperfect, but that the core of what he had seen, the person, was not in doubt. He said he had looked at that face for 45 seconds. He said he would never forget it. The jury believed him. In the specific context of a trial with no physical evidence and a sole eyewitness who was calm and specific and certain, they believed him. They deliberated for 3 days. They found David Okafor guilty of aggravated assault causing grievous bodily harm. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison. He was 31 years old. Patricia, his girlfriend, sat in the gallery and wept. His mother was calling from Nigeria on a phone that could not be answered. His crew of 3 men, who had come to support him, walked out of the courthouse in silence. David said nothing when the verdict was read. He had been told, by his attorney, to maintain composure regardless of the outcome. He maintained it. He was the most composed person in the room. He stood straight and looked forward and did not let anyone see what was happening inside him. He let himself feel it, finally, alone in his cell that first night. And then he put it away and began to think about what to do next. David Okafor entered the Oregon State Prison System in April 2005. He was 31 years old. He would be 47 when he came out. Patricia waited for 2 years. She visited, she wrote, she believed in him. But 2 years into an 18-year wait, the minimum before first parole consideration, she told him she could not continue. She told him she was sorry. She told him she would always believe he was innocent. She was 32 years old, and she needed to live her life. David told her he understood. He did understand. He did not hold it against her. But the understanding and the loss were not the same thing, and he sat with the loss for a long time. He built a life inside. He became, over the years, one of the most effective jailhouse lawyers in the facility, helping other inmates with their cases, drafting motions, understanding the procedural landscape that many inmates were simply not equipped to navigate. He was good at it. The same precision and reliability that had made him a good builder made him a careful legal researcher. He filed his own appeals with meticulous attention. In 2008, in 2012, in 2016, each was rejected. The courts, reviewing the case, found Robert Kessler's testimony credible and the inconsistencies insufficient to overturn. His mother died in 2013 in Nigeria. He was not permitted to attend the funeral. He had last seen her in person in 2003, before the attack, before the arrest, before all of it. She had died without seeing him free. He continued. The continuation was itself a form of argument against the system's conclusion, against the possibility that it would never be corrected. Every morning, he continued, was a refusal to accept the verdict as the final word. In 2019, a newly appointed attorney at the Oregon Innocence Project named Grace Tanaka was assigned to review David Okafor's case as part of a systematic audit of old conviction files that the organization was conducting. Grace was 29 years old. She had been practicing for 3 years. She had the specific quality of a young attorney who has not yet learned to dismiss things as unlikely, who treats every case as if the evidence might say something different from what it has been taken to say. She began with the car park. She located the car park on a mapping application and examined its relationship to the road where Robert Kessler had stopped his car. The distance between the edge of the road and the location where the attack had occurred was, she estimated, between 40 and 50 meters. She then looked at the lighting. The car park's lighting had been the subject of a council maintenance complaint in 2003, documented in public council records, and 2 of the 3 sodium lights had been non-functional at the time. The functioning light was at the north end of the car park. The attack had occurred at the south end. She commissioned a lighting and visibility assessment from a forensic expert. The expert's conclusion was unequivocal. At the time of the attack, from Robert Kessler's position on the road, the visibility of a person at the south end of the car park was insufficient for reliable facial identification. This was the first piece. The second piece came from the car park itself. A council CCTV camera covering the road adjacent to the car park had been operational on the night of August 19, 2004. In 2005, this footage had been requested by David's defense team and had been told it no longer existed. The council's retention period was 90 days and the footage had been overwritten. In 2020, during a council archive digitization project, a backup copy of the footage was discovered on an old server that had not been properly decommissioned. The footage showed the road outside the car park for the full evening of August 19th. It showed Robert Kessler's car stopping at the roadside. It showed the car park entrance. It also showed, with complete clarity, the figure who ran from the car park at the time of the attack. The figure was not David Okafor. The figure was a white male, approximately 40 years old, wearing a red top under a dark jacket, precisely matching Robert Kessler's original night of description, before his memory had reconstructed the attacker into someone who matched the man he had identified in the lineup. This was the second piece. The third piece was Philip Graves. In 2021, 16 years after the attack, Philip's memory had partially recovered, a rare but documented phenomenon in traumatic brain injury cases. He could not remember the night of the attack, but he could remember the weeks before it. He could remember a specific individual who had threatened him over a financial dispute in July 2004. He described that individual. His description matched the figure on the CCTV footage. This was the third piece. The Oregon Innocence Project submitted its findings to the state courts in November 2021. The case was referred to the Oregon Court of Appeals in February 2022. The prosecution, reviewing the 3 pieces of evidence, acknowledged that the conviction could not stand. The CCTV footage was, they said in a formal submission, the most significant new evidence, but the lighting assessment and Philip Graves' recovered memory together created a picture that was fundamentally incompatible with the original verdict. The conviction was quashed in May 2022. David Okafor walked out of the Two Rivers Correctional Institution in Umatilla, Oregon on a warm May morning. He was 47 years old. He had entered the system at 31. Grace Tanaka was there. She had driven 3 hours from Portland the previous evening and stayed overnight because she had told David she would be there, and she had meant it. His former crew, 3 men now in their 40s and 50s who had kept in occasional contact over the years, had driven together from Portland. They were standing by a truck when David came through the gates. The same truck, rebuilt and repainted, that the oldest of them had been driving when David managed their crew. David looked at the truck. He looked at the 3 men. He said, "Is that the same truck?" The oldest of them said, "Mostly." David said, "Good. I need work." They all laughed. It was the right kind of laugh. the kind that comes from a place too deep for politeness. And David Okafor got into the truck and went home. Robert Kessler was not charged with any offense. He had not lied. He had been wrong. Wrong in ways that were completely genuine, that reflected exactly what the science of memory predicts when a person witnesses a stressful event at distance in poor light and is then asked to remember and identify months later. He issued a public statement after David's exoneration. He said he was devastated. He said he had been certain. He said he still, in some part of his memory, saw the face he had seen in the car park, and that face still looked like the face in the photograph lineup, and he could not explain how that was possible when the CCTV footage showed something different. He said he was deeply sorry. That statement, David said later, was the one that stayed with him longest. Not because of the apologies, he said, are easy, but because of what it described. The persistence of a wrong memory. The way the brain holds on to its reconstruction even when the evidence says otherwise. The way certainty can survive the truth. The real attacker, the white male in the red top, was identified from the CCTV footage in late 2022. He had died in 2019 without ever being charged. Philip Graves' justice, in that specific sense, would never fully come. David Okafor received compensation from the state of Oregon, $50,000 per year for 16 years, amounting to $800,000. He filed civil claims that were settled in 2023 for additional undisclosed amounts. He returned to construction work. He runs a larger business now than before, employing 12 people, managing projects across the Portland area. He hired Grace Tanaka's younger brother, who had just qualified as a site engineer, as something between gratitude and what he called cosmic accounting. He and Grace remain in contact. He attends the Oregon Innocence Project's annual fundraising event every year and says the same thing each time, that the work they do is the most important legal work being done in the state, and that he knows this not as an abstraction but as a man who needed them to look at a car park lighting report. David was asked in a recent interview what he wanted people to understand about Robert Kessler. He thought for a long time. Then he said, "I do not hate him. I want to be clear about that. He saw something terrible happen and he tried to help. He went to a petrol station and called the police when he could have driven home. That was a good impulse. The problem was not his impulse. The problem was a justice system that built a conviction on 45 seconds of observation in a poorly lit car park and called it proof beyond reasonable doubt." He paused. Then he said, "If you asked Robert Kessler today what color top the attacker was wearing, I think he would say dark. Because that is what his memory says now. And the system that convicted me trusted that memory, trusted it completely, and never asked whether a car park at midnight, at 50 meters, with 2 broken lights, was a place where any human memory could reliably hold a face. It couldn't. Mine paid the price. And somewhere right now, another person's memory is being trusted in exactly the same way. In another car park, under another set of broken lights. And the system is calling it beyond reasonable doubt. That is the story. That is the thing I cannot put down." Can you?